The scream tore through the canyon like a rifle shot, echoing off jagged cliffs and sending a flock of startled ravens into the sky. Mara Hayes froze mid-step, her heart hammering like a wild stallion. The sound came again, piercing, desperate, human. Somewhere in the fast-turning waters of the Pecos River, a child was in trouble. Mara didn't think. Instinct overrode fear, and she kicked off her worn boots, tugged off her coat, and dove into the icy torrent. The water was shockingly cold, biting her skin and clawing at her chest with every pulse of the current. Rocks scraped her legs and arms, the river threatening to pull her under with merciless strength. She strained her eyes through the white foam, searching for the source of the cry, and then she saw him. A small boy, no more than 10, dark hair plastered to his forehead, limbs flailing helplessly. He had been caught in an eddy, spinning in the water as if the river itself were trying to swallow him whole. Mara reached him, gripping his tiny wrist. "Hold on!" she shouted, swallowing river water as she fought the current. Her muscles burned, but adrenaline drove her forward. The boy's wide brown eyes locked on hers, terror mirrored in their depths. Mara wrapped her arms around him, lifting him toward the shallower waters. A jagged rock scraped her side, sending a sharp pain up her ribs, but she forced herself to ignore it. Inch by inch, they moved closer to the riverbank. Finally, with a surge of strength she didn't know she possessed, she dragged them both onto the muddy shore. Coughing and shivering, Mara clutched the boy to her chest. He was alive. That alone was enough for a moment to make her chest heave with relief. "You're safe now," she said, her teeth chattering. The boy stared at her, his small body trembling violently. "Why, you?" "You're the white woman," he stammered. His voice was hesitant, scared, but there was recognition in his tone, almost disbelief. Mara blinked, water dripping from her long, dark hair. I didn't come to fight you," she said carefully. "I came to save you." Recognition flashed in his eyes. He pointed shakily upstream. "The river. It would have taken me. My father." His voice broke. Mara's gaze followed the boy's pointing finger and froze as she saw him, Takoda. Tall, muscular, and deadly, the young Comanche chief stood at the riverbank, silhouetted against the golden sunlight. His long black hair whipped around his face in the wind, dark eyes narrowed with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You saved him," Takoda said slowly, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of danger. "Why?" Mara's teeth chattered as she pulled the boy closer. "Because no child deserves to die. Even yours." For a long moment, Takoda said nothing. His eyes flicked between Mara and the boy, taking in her drenched frame, the way her chest heaved from exertion, and the raw determination in her gaze. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "You are fearless." "Foolish but fearless," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Come, you will stay, and you will answer for your presence among us." Mara helped the boy to stand, and together they followed Takoda along a narrow path that led through of cottonwoods. The wind tugged at Mara's wet hair, and she shivered despite the exertion. She noticed that the boy wore a small eagle feather necklace, a symbol of his father's standing and the tribe's pride. Her mind whirred with questions, but there was no time for answers. Survival came first. As they approached the camp, Mara felt the tension radiating from the Comanche warriors. Their eyes were sharp, assessing, suspicious. Children peeked from behind their mothers, whispering. Mara realized that, in this world, every action had consequences. She had saved the boy, yes, but that had also placed her directly in the center of a dangerous and unfamiliar culture, one in which every misstep could be fatal. The camp sprawled in a shallow clearing, tipis clustered among trees and smoke curling lazily from cooking fires. Mara felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her as Takoda led them through the center. The boy Nayan clung to her hand, his trust in her absolute. She felt the fragile thread of connection between them, trust forged in the crucible of near death. That evening, Mara sat beside Nayan near a fire, his small body pressed against hers for warmth. The night was alive with sounds, the crackling of the fire, the distant call of coyotes, the whisper of the wind through the cottonwoods. She told him stories of her life in the frontier, of homesteads buried in dust and plains that stretched like oceans of gold and brown, hoping to distract him from the fear that still lingered in his eyes. "You're different from the others," Nayan said softly, staring into the fire. You don't hate me." Mara smiled, brushing damp hair from her face. "I've never hated anyone for who they are," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The boy let out a shaky laugh, the sound fragile but genuine. Mara realized that despite the danger, despite the unfamiliarity of this new world, there was a connection here that transcended bloodlines or allegiances. She had saved his life, yes, but he had already begun saving hers in ways she could not yet understand. Night deepened, and Mara lay awake on the ground outside the tipi where she had been assigned a place to sleep. Stars twinkled overhead, cold and distant. The river's roar was a faint memory, but its warning lingered in her mind. She thought of Takoda's dark eyes, the way he had surveyed her with equal parts anger and curiosity. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her, an enemy, a friend, or something in between. She thought of Nayan and how his small hand had fit into hers, how much trust he had placed in her. And she realized something terrifying. Saving him had bound her fate to this boy, and through him to this tribe in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Mara's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Takoda appeared beside the fire, his shadow stretching long across the ground. "You have courage," he said simply, his eyes reflecting the flames. That courage could be a gift, or a curse. Time will tell. Mara nodded, too tired and too wary to speak. She sensed that this night was a beginning, not an end. The river had almost claimed a life, and yet it had delivered her into a world of unknown perils and possibly unexpected alliances. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and smoke, the mingled aroma of life and death, danger and hope. Mara hugged Nayan closer. "We survived the river," she whispered to him, almost to herself. "And we'll survive what comes next." Somewhere in the shadows, Takoda's eyes lingered on her, unreadable. Mara didn't know if he saw a threat or a potential ally. But she understood that trust, once earned in this world, was both fragile and fiercely defended. And she intended to defend it, no matter the cost. As the first embers of the fire glowed against the dark sky, Mara closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. She dreamed of rushing waters and small hands clinging to hers, of faces both fearsome and familiar, of a boy whose life she had saved and who, in saving, had also saved a piece of her own humanity. The river had claimed many before, and it would claim many again. But tonight, Mara Hayes had stared into its mouth and refused to let it take a child's life. And in that defiance, she had found a fragile, terrifying foothold in a world that would demand everything she had: courage, wit, and perhaps a heart capable of seeing beyond bloodlines and loyalty, into the true measure of bravery. Tomorrow, the tribe would judge her. Tomorrow, danger would test her resolve in ways she could not yet imagine. But for tonight, she had saved a life. And in the Old West, that was a beginning worth fighting for. The morning sun glinted off the Pecos River, turning the water into molten gold as Mara Hayes trudged through the soft sand toward the Comanche camp. Her clothes were still damp from the river, and the chill in the air clung stubbornly to her skin. Nayan ran ahead, his small bare feet kicking up dust as he darted between the tipis with the boundless energy of youth, laughter spilling into the quiet morning. Mara watched him for a moment, her heart swelling. She had saved his life once, yes, but she was beginning to realize that he, in turn, had saved her from a life of isolation and fear. And yet, despite the warmth in her chest, an undercurrent of unease remained. She was still a stranger in this world, a white woman among the Comanche, and the eyes of the tribe followed her every move with suspicion. Takoda approached from the center of the camp, long strides carrying him effortlessly across the dusty clearing. His presence commanded attention. Even the wind seemed to pause around him, swirling his long black hair and tugging at the feathers tied into his braid. His muscular frame, toned from years of survival in the unforgiving plains, exuded authority. But there was an unmistakable softness in his eyes as he looked toward Nayan. "Mara," he said, his deep voice cutting through the morning air. "Come with me. There is a place you must see." Mara nodded and followed, keeping Nayan close. They passed through the tipis, where the tribe was already bustling with morning activity. Women prepared fires and food, men tended horses and sharpened weapons, and children laughed and shouted as they chased each other through the camp. Mara had watched this rhythm for days, learning the routines, the hierarchies, and the unspoken rules. Yet she was reminded now that, despite her growing familiarity, she remained an outsider. Takoda led her toward a narrow path that climbed gently into the hills behind the camp. The air was filled with the scent of sage and dry earth, and the wind carried the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. At the top of the ridge, Mara paused, taking in the view. Below them lay a hidden valley, a natural amphitheater of cliffs and trees, with a small creek winding like a silver ribbon through the grass. "This is our sanctuary," Takoda said, his eyes scanning the valley. "Few outsiders know of this place. It protects us, and it will protect you if you earn your place among us." Mara nodded, her gaze fixed on the creek where the sunlight danced across the water. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "I understand why your tribe calls this home." Takoda's expression softened, but the underlying tension remained. Beauty alone does not guarantee safety. This land has been fought over, stolen from, and defended with blood. You must remember that. Mara swallowed, her mind turning over his words. She had already seen glimpses of the danger that lurked in the frontier, the river, the harsh wilderness, and now the human threats that loomed on the horizon. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of wonder, the valley stretching wide beneath them like a secret kept safe from the world. "Will Nayan be safe here?" she asked. Her voice carried more concern than she intended. Takoda's dark eyes softened as they fell on his son. "He is safe because of you," he said. "But safety is never guaranteed. You must be ready for anything." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of instruction and observation. Mara learned to carry water without spilling a drop, to move quietly between the tipis, and to understand the subtle cues of the tribe, the tilt of a head, the shift in posture, the glance that conveyed a warning or a welcome. Nayan clung to her side as she adapted, his small hand a comforting weight against hers. By midday, Mara felt a strange sense of belonging. She had earned small smiles from the women, nods from the warriors, and quiet respect from the elders. She knew that she was still under scrutiny, but the bond she had formed with Nayan had become her shield, giving her courage she did not know she possessed. But the fragile calm was broken by a sudden, sharp whistle from the ridge above the camp. Mara's stomach tightened. She looked toward the tree line and saw movement figures on horseback, riding fast, their scarves covering their faces. Weapons glinting in the sunlight, outsiders. Takoda reacted immediately, his voice sharp as he barked orders. Warriors ran to intercept the intruders, forming a protective perimeter around the camp. Mara grabbed Nayan, pulling him behind a fallen tree as arrows and bullets began to fly. Mara's heart raced, but her mind stayed sharp. She noticed a small ridge leading to the creek, a potential escape route. She grabbed Nayan's hand. "We have to move," she whispered. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but he trusted her completely. Together, they ran down the slope, ducking behind rocks and thick brush. The attackers fired indiscriminately, but Takoda and his warriors fought with lethal precision, cutting down anyone who came too close. Mara saw the power of his command, the strength of his people, and the ferocity that had kept the Comanche alive for generations. As they reached the creek, Mara paused to catch her breath. Nayan was shaking, but alive. She pulled him close, pressing her wet hair from her eyes. "We're safe for now," she said, though the uncertainty of the next attack gnawed at her. From their vantage point, Mara watched Takoda's warriors corral the attackers into a narrow pass. The outsiders were skilled, but they were not prepared for the intimate knowledge of the terrain, nor the strategic brilliance of Takoda. Mara realized that this was more than a skirmish, it was a test, a demonstration of the tribe's strength and a warning to anyone who thought they could threaten them. Hours later, when the camp had quieted and the last of the attackers had fled or been captured, Mara helped tend to the wounded. Her knowledge of frontier medicine, crude but effective, proved invaluable. She bandaged cuts, treated bruises, and reassured those who were frightened. Nayan hovered nearby, offering water to the injured with small hands that were already learning compassion alongside courage. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the valley in gold and crimson, Takoda approached Mara. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried weight. "You have proven yourself today," he said, "not only in courage but in heart. You may not be Comanche by blood, but your actions have earned you a place here. That is something few outsiders ever achieve." Mara felt a warmth rise in her chest. I only did what I had to do," she said, looking down at Nayan, whose eyes shone with admiration and trust. Takoda's gaze shifted to his son. "And in saving him, you have secured more than your place among us. You have protected the soul of this camp. Remember that. Danger will come again, Mara Hayes, and when it does, you will be tested. But tonight, you are one of us in purpose, if not in blood." The boy ran to Mara, throwing his small arms around her waist. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice muffled against her coat. "I don't want to be scared anymore." Mara hugged him tightly. "You don't have to be," she whispered. "I'll make sure of that." That night, Mara lay awake in the tipi assigned to her, listening to the crackle of the fire and the rhythmic breathing of the tribe around her. The events of the day, the skirmish, the courage of Takoda and his warriors, Nayan's trust, and the realization that she had truly become a part of this fragile, fierce family spun through her mind like a tapestry of fear and hope. She thought of the river, which had nearly claimed Nayan's life, and the creek, which had become a shield. She thought of Takoda, whose respect she had earned, and the challenges that lay ahead. And she understood, more clearly than ever, that survival in this world required more than strength. It demanded trust, courage, and an unwavering heart. Tomorrow would bring more lessons, more dangers, and perhaps the first signs of the outsider threat that still lingered like a shadow on the horizon. But for now, Mara allowed herself a moment of peace. She had earned her place among the Comanche. She had saved a life. And she had discovered something even more valuable, a purpose that transcended survival, a connection that bound her to a boy and a tribe in ways she had never imagined. The hidden valley, once just a secret refuge, had become the stage for her courage, her growth, and the first chapter of a life that would be tested again and again, but which Mara knew she would face with the same fierce determination that had driven her into the river to save Nayan. For tonight, she closed her eyes and listened to the whispers of the wind through the cottonwoods. the gentle lapping of the creek, and the steady rhythm of a tribe that had, at least for now, accepted her into its heart. And somewhere deep within, Mara Hayes knew that this was only the beginning. Weeks had passed since the river incident, and the hidden valley had begun to feel like home to Mara Hayes. The sun rose over the Pecos, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson, and the gentle murmur of the creek sounded almost like a lullaby. Mara had become part of the daily rhythm of the camp, moving alongside the Comanche with quiet confidence, helping where she could, learning their ways, and growing closer to Nayan. The boy had changed since the day she rescued him. His laughter rang through the camp as he ran among the tipis, always keeping a wary eye on Mara as if she were a lifeline tethered to his small heart. Mara, in turn, had grown fiercely protective of him, her own survival instincts intertwining with a deep, maternal sense of responsibility. Yet the peace was fragile. Danger lingered on the edge of the valley like a shadow, and Mara knew it would not remain hidden for long. That morning, Mara was collecting herbs near the creek when she noticed movement in the brush. At first, she thought it might be Nayan, but then she saw the glint of metal and the subtle whisper of men's voices. Her heart skipped a beat. She crouched behind a rock, straining to listen. "They'll never see us coming," one man said, voice low and urgent. "The Comanche have no idea how close we are. We take the supply route tonight and they'll have nothing left." Mara's stomach churned. Outsiders. They were planning to strike within days, targeting the tribe's provisions and sacred grounds. But what made her blood run cold was the other voice, a soft, familiar whisper from within the camp itself. "You'll have the map and the route," the insider said. "But remember, if anything goes wrong, we lose everything. The Comanche must never know." Mara realized with horror that betrayal had already taken root within the camp. Someone they trusted, was conspiring with the outsiders. She clenched her fists, heart pounding. Nayan's life and the lives of everyone she had come to care for were at stake. She ran to find Takoda, weaving through the camp with speed born of urgency. The warriors were already preparing for the day's hunting and chores, unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. Mara found Takoda near the central fire, sharpening his bow. His posture stiffened as he saw her approach, sensing the tension radiating off her. "There is betrayal," she said, breathless. "Outsiders are coming for us, and someone in the camp is helping them." Takoda's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Who? I don't know all their names," Mara admitted, "but I saw them near the creek. They were passing maps and instructions. We have to prepare. We have to protect the camp." Takoda stood, towering over her with the authority of a man who had fought every day of his life for survival. "You have done well to notice this," he said. "We must act carefully. The traitor must be exposed, but not before we secure the camp. If the outsiders arrive and find us divided, we are finished." Mara nodded, her mind already racing with plans. "We can use the terrain," she said. "Lead them into the narrow passes where your warriors have the advantage. We can control the attack if we know where they will strike." Takoda's eyes gleamed with a mixture of respect and wariness. "You have learned well, Mara Hayes. Your courage is evident, but your mind is sharper than most who have ever entered this valley. I will trust you with this, but one mistake. One, and it could cost everything." The tension in the camp escalated as the day wore on. Mara helped fortify the entrances, stacking rocks and setting up vantage points, while Takoda quietly summoned his warriors for a council. Nayan stayed close, watching her with wide eyes, absorbing the lessons of strategy and vigilance with the curiosity of youth. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the valley, Mara noticed movement again, a subtle ripple in the grass, a whisper of sound that did not belong to the wind. She motioned for Nayan to stay low and crept toward the source, only to find a figure crouched near the edge of the ridge. It was a man from the camp, unmistakably the traitor she had seen earlier. He froze as Mara stepped into view. "You? How did you—" "You will not betray this tribe," Mara said, her voice firm, unyielding. "Not while I am here." The man's eyes flickered with fear. "You don't understand. They promised death if you fail," Mara interrupted. "And that's exactly what you'll bring to everyone you care about if you go through with this. Tell me everything now, or I will go to Takoda." The man hesitated, then, beaten by her resolve, he spilled the details. Outsiders would strike at dusk, aiming for the supply route and sacred grounds. He had been promised gold, a share of the Comanche's resources, and safety in return, but he had underestimated the loyalty and skill of Takoda and his people. Mara's mind raced. She could barely imagine the chaos that would ensue if the outsiders arrived unchallenged. She ran back to the camp, finding Takoda and the warriors already on alert. "They will come tonight," she said. "The traitor has revealed their plans. We can set a trap." Takoda's expression was solemn, but a flicker of approval passed through his eyes. "You have proven yourself once more. Mara Hayes, tonight we fight not only for the tribe, but for the boy you saved, for the land, and for every life we hold dear." As night fell, the camp transformed into a fortress. Torches cast flickering shadows against the tipis, and warriors took their positions along the ridges, bows and arrows ready. Mara moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement, her mind calculating every angle of attack. Nayan clung to her side, clutching his eagle feather necklace tightly. The first distant hooves echoed through the valley, and Mara's heart leapt into her throat. The outsiders had arrived, riding hard and fast, their faces covered, guns glinting in the torchlight. Takoda's warriors held their ground, forming a defensive line with practiced precision. Mara spotted an opening along the ridge that could serve as a choke point. "Lead them here," she whispered to one of the warriors. "They'll have nowhere to run." The attackers surged forward, but the Comanche were ready. Arrows rained down, horses stumbled, and the sounds of battle, the clash of metal, the screams of men, the thunder of hooves filled the night. Mara moved with purpose, helping to tend to the wounded, directing warriors to flank positions, and keeping Nayan safe behind her. At one point, she saw an outlaw grab Nayan, dragging him toward the edge of a small cliff near the creek. Without hesitation, Mara leapt, grabbing him mid-air. Her hands burned against the rough rock, her body trembling, but she refused to let go. The outlaw fell back into the fray, cursing, defeated by her strength and determination. Takoda fought beside her, a whirlwind of skill and authority. Together, they coordinated the defense, the attackers gradually realizing that the Comanche were not just defending land, they were defending family, honor, and life itself. By the time the moon rose high above the valley, the last of the outsiders had been routed or captured. Mara sank to the ground, exhausted but unbroken. Nayan clung to her, whispering, "You saved me again." Mara smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "We saved each other," she said. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of truth. Takoda approached, surveying the aftermath. His warriors had suffered minor injuries, but the tribe had survived intact. He knelt beside Mara, his eyes locked on hers. "You have done more than anyone could have asked," he said quietly. "You are no longer just a guest here. You are part of this family, part of this tribe. And Nayan, he is lucky to have you." Mara felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't known she could feel in weeks. The bond she had forged with Nayan and Takoda was unbreakable, tested in fire and water, betrayal and battle. She realized, too, that her life had changed irrevocably. The frontier she had known, full of dust and loneliness, had been replaced by a life of purpose, courage, and connection dangerous, yes, but infinitely richer. As the first rays of dawn crept into the valley, Mara sat beside the creek, Nayan resting his head on her lap. She looked out over the valley, the aftermath of the battle etched into the landscape, and knew that more challenges lay ahead. But for the first time, she felt ready. The hidden valley had become more than a refuge. It had become a crucible, shaping her into someone capable of facing any threat. Mara Hayes had survived the river. She had earned the trust of a fierce tribe. And she had confronted betrayal, standing firm when everything she held dear was at risk. Tonight, she had learned that courage was more than daring acts. It was strategy, loyalty, and the willingness to risk everything for those you loved. And Mara Hayes, protector of Nayan and ally of Takoda, knew that she would face whatever came next with unflinching resolve. The valley lay quiet, but Mara's heart was alive with the promise of tomorrow, a promise she would honor, no matter the cost. The valley was quiet, too quiet, as the sun began to dip behind the ridges, casting the hidden world in a wash of amber and fire. Mara Hayes adjusted the straps of her pack, her muscles taut with anticipation. Weeks of preparation had brought them to this moment, the final test of the Comanche's strength. The culmination of every danger and every choice she had made since plunging into the Pecos River to save Nayan. Nayan ran up to her, small bare feet kicking up dust. His brown eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Will they come?" he asked, clutching the eagle feather necklace that hung around his neck. Mara knelt and brushed his hair from his forehead. "They will," she said softly. "But we are ready. Takoda has trained you, and we've trained ourselves. Together, we are stronger than they know." Takoda emerged from the ridge, his long black hair catching the last rays of sunlight. His presence was imposing, the sinewy muscles of a lifetime spent in the wilderness visible even beneath his simple tunic. He nodded once at Mara, a silent acknowledgment of the bond they now shared, forged in danger, trust, and mutual respect. The first signs of the outlaws came at dusk, a distant cloud of dust rising over the ridge, the thunder of hooves carrying through the valley like a warning drum. Mara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. Nayan clutched her hand, trusting her completely, and she drew strength from his faith in her. "Positions," Takoda commanded, voice low but firm. Warriors moved like shadows across the ridges, forming lines and creating choke points, setting traps Mara had helped design. The attackers, confident in their numbers, had no idea what awaited them in the valley's winding terrain. Mara stayed close to the creek, scanning the approaching figures. She could see their scarved faces, the glint of rifles, the malice in their movements. But she also saw something else, a spark of overconfidence that she and Takoda could exploit. "Remember," Takoda said, leaning close, "we fight for family, for life, for our home. No matter what happens, Nayan survives. That is our priority." Mara nodded, determination hardening in her chest. "I won't let anything happen to him." The outlaws surged forward, their horses' hooves pounding against the dry earth. Mara signaled to the warriors along the ridge, and arrows rained down, thudding into shields, striking horses, cutting off escape routes. Chaos erupted among the attackers, but Mara could see they were adapting, pushing toward the creek where she and Nayan waited. Suddenly, one of the outlaws broke from the line and bolted toward them, gun raised. Mara reacted instinctively, shoving Nayan behind a boulder and drawing her own weapon. The outlaw fired, and the bullet chipped the rock beside them. Mara lunged forward, tackling him into the dust. She felt the adrenaline spike, but her training, instincts, and her resolve to protect Nayan guided her movements. In the midst of the skirmish, Mara saw Nayan wandering too close to the edge of a small cliff by the creek. Panic surged in her chest. Before she could shout, a hand grabbed him, dragging him toward the cliff's edge. Without hesitation, Mara sprinted, leaping forward and catching him midair as the outlaw lost balance. The rocks cut her palms, and her legs buckled under the strain, but she held him tight, refusing to let go. The outlaw fell backward into the melee, defeated by the sheer force of her determination. Mara knelt on the edge, her breath ragged, holding Nayan close. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you, always." From the ridge, Takoda's voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "Now, push them into the pass." The Comanche warriors surged, driving the attackers toward a narrow canyon where their advantage was absolute. Mara moved alongside them, firing arrows with precision, guiding Nayan to safer spots and keeping the attackers disoriented. The battle stretched for hours, the sun sinking fully below the horizon. The outlaws, once confident and aggressive, began to falter under the calculated fury of the Comanche and the strategic brilliance Mara had helped implement. Every trap, every barricade, every movement had been anticipated. By midnight, the last of the attackers had fled or been captured. Exhausted, Mara sank to the ground, Nayan pressed against her chest. She felt blood on her hands from scrapes and cuts, sweat mixing with the dust of the valley, but her heart swelled with relief. The boy was alive. The camp was safe. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. Takoda approached, surveying the battlefield. His warriors were bruised but triumphant, the valley still and silent except for the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. He knelt beside Mara and Nayan, placing a strong hand on her shoulder. "You have proven yourself," he said, voice low and filled with emotion. "Not as a captive, not as an outsider, but as one of us. Your courage, your intelligence, and your heart have saved lives tonight more than anyone can count." Mara looked at him, her own voice catching. I just did what had to be done," she whispered. "No," Takoda said firmly. "You did more than what had to be done. You gave us hope. You gave us victory. And most importantly, you gave Nayan a future." The boy peeked out from between them, his eyes shining with admiration. "You're my hero," he said softly. Mara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We saved each other, Nayan," she said. "That's what heroes do." The following morning, the camp was quiet in a way that felt new, peaceful, almost fragile. Mara moved among the warriors and women, checking on the wounded, helping rebuild the tipis, and offering guidance where she could. The trust she had earned was evident in their gestures, a nod here, a hand on her shoulder there, children running to her without hesitation. Takoda approached her as the sun climbed over the ridge, casting long shadows across the valley. "Mara," he said, "tonight you will sit by the fire not as a guest, but as family. You have earned this place among us. And Nayan, he will always know that he was saved by the bravest heart in the valley." Mara's chest tightened with emotion. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere," she admitted. "But here, with him, with you, I feel like I finally have a purpose." Takoda's dark eyes softened, and he nodded. Purpose is the greatest gift a person can find. And tonight, we celebrate not just survival, but the bond that keeps us strong. The bond of family, courage, and loyalty. That evening, the tribe gathered around a large fire in the center of the camp. Warriors, elders, women, and children all came together, forming a circle of unity. Takoda raised his voice, commanding silence. "We have faced danger, betrayal, and outsiders. We have fought and survived. And we have learned that strength is not measured by muscle alone, but by courage, loyalty, and heart." He looked directly at Mara Hayes. "You risked everything to save Nayan. You risked your life, your safety, and your future. You are no longer just a visitor here. You are family. And for that, we honor you." The tribe erupted into cheers, voices echoing across the valley. Mara felt tears prick at her eyes, Nayan clinging to her side. She realized then that the river that had nearly claimed his life had also led her to this place, to these people, and to a sense of belonging she had never imagined. Takoda joined her at the fire, placing a hand on her shoulder. The river, the betrayal, the outsiders. They were tests. And you have passed every one. Your courage has given life not only to Nayan, but to this valley, this tribe, and the legacy we protect. Mara rested her head on Nayan's shoulder, looking up at the stars beginning to pierce the night sky. "I've learned that courage isn't just about survival," she whispered. "It's about protecting what you love, even when it costs everything." Nayan nodded sleepily, his small hand clutching hers. "I love you, Mara," he said softly. Mara smiled through her tears, feeling the weight of every danger, every choice, and every act of bravery she had undertaken. "And I love you, Nayan, more than you can imagine." As the fire crackled and the tribe celebrated around them, Mara realized that the hidden valley, once a sanctuary, had become home. She had faced death in the river, betrayal within the camp, and attacks from those who sought to destroy them. And yet she had endured. She had found purpose, courage, and a family that spanned beyond blood, a family forged in trust, loyalty, and love. The Pecos River flowed quietly beyond the valley, a reminder of the dangers Mara had survived and the life she had preserved. And as the stars reflected in the creek's shimmering water, she understood that her story in the Old West was no longer one of fear or isolation. It was a story of hope, bravery, and the enduring bonds of heart and family. Mara Hayes had found her place, and she knew that no force river, outsider, or betrayal could ever take it from her. The valley, the tribe, and Nayan were hers to protect, and she would do so without hesitation, without fear, and with unwavering courage.